Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, hooligan shills, nutslicers, peasants, protesters, tea partiers, occupiers, useful idiots. I am a useful idiot, and I'd like to talk about other useful idiots. And in this case, I'm talking about protesters. And before everybody gets all their underwear in a bunch, like so many others, I have a lot of admiration for protesters. I mean, when I see giant protests out in the streets of Tehran, Iran, or I see anti-austerity marches all across Europe, it definitely stirs something in me. I like to see people out in the street and putting their money where their mouth is. And that's great. It's very stirring. I've spent some time protesting myself over the years, including a huge event here in Seattle about a decade ago. And so anyway, I think protest movements and people getting in the streets definitely stirs the imagination. A lot of people who see problems in the world and want to address those issues. And it seems like one of the most direct and provocative and effective ways to get out there and conceivably change things. But there's a dark side to this, and that's what I want to talk about. Because I'm not sure how effective protesting it is, and it has some major pitfalls. But like so many other avenues available to the citizen to complain about things that are wrong with the government and our economy and our systems, there's not too many avenues to go. For example, I write my congressman. I know it probably doesn't do any good because we can vote 99 to 1 on something, and they'll still vote for the 1. And we get these rote, machine-written letters back, or some interns in their office handle these things, and they never even get our message generally. So anyway, I'm not really sure what to say. Each person has to find their own method, find their own message, and their vehicle. So that said, let's talk about useful idiots. The major pitfall, is that it leaves open for the elites and the handlers and the power structures that the protesters are going against to get exactly what they want and have these people play right into their hands. A good example is you look at the protests that are going on now anywhere in the world, and particularly here in the United States. And it's very easy for the police or any other interested parties to plant one person. You can have a crowd of 20,000 people and you plant one agent provocateur in that crowd, and a live round goes off and hits a policeman, and it's game over. That's how easy it is. And that's not to mention just the argument that you can go and interview some of the protesters, and a lot of them don't even have any concept of the issues. And that's very unfortunate. Their own worst advertisement. I know, looking at the Green Party over the years, Ralph Nader and the Green Party as an alternative third party really never stood a chance, because all the corporate media has to do is go interview one stoner that just goes on and on about legalizing pot, and the credibility of the whole movement is unraveled. Same way with Occupy New York. You know, they catch one guy taking a crap in the park and get a photograph of it, and all of a sudden the entire movement becomes a giant health hazard. And it's very easy for them to color these things however they want. A good example is here in the local Seattle paper. You know, it says police move quickly to suppress anarchists. So we had a peaceful protest here for May Day, and there was a handful, maybe 20, so-called anarchists who went around and trashed stores. And of course, you know, they trashed the Nike store, and the irony isn't lost that a couple of the anarchists were wearing Nike shoes. Or, you know, you have crowds of people that occupy New York, and they go on and on about corporate oppression, and they're all buying their Cokes, and they're talking on their Apple iPhones, and wearing their designer jeans and their corporate T-shirts and their, you know, all their designer corporate swag. So the message gets kind of watered down when things like that happen. But let's get down to some more of the brass tacks. I mean, historically, we have plenty of examples of this. You know, look at all the people that got out in the street and protested before the Iraq War, and that didn't do any good. They wanted the war, and they're going to get it anyway. The same thing with the Vietnam War. I know the baby boomer generation, of which I'm a latter part, likes to pat themselves on the back for ending the Vietnam War. But trust me, they didn't end the Vietnam War. The war went on as long as they needed it to go on, and the protests really had nothing to do with it, other than an annoyance. And frankly, having been alive and sentient at that time, I can tell you for a fact that a lot of the protest movement was just a giant fashion statement. It was cool to protest. It's kind of cool to protest now. So sure, the trendy, uptight, trendy hipster bitches that are out there today, just like the ones back in the 60s, you know, they want to smoke some pot and have free love and listen to loud rock music, and then they go out and protest, and everybody's in it, and it feels like you're part of something. And that's part of the pull of protesting. You feel like you're part of something. You feel like you're doing something. And, you know, that's all fine and good. But it was a giant fashion statement. If you need any proof that I'm correct in that, well, look what happened to the baby boomer generation now. They pat themselves on the back for protesting and ending the Vietnam War, and yet now, you know, they drive their gas-guzzling SUVs and check their stock portfolios while their wife's doing Pilates and their kids are in private schools. So hardly the same generation, and laying on their laurels of self-satisfaction. And a good example of that is in 1970, of course, there was a police confrontation with protesters at Kent State University in Ohio, and somebody threw something or something out of the crowd, and they heard a shot, or supposedly, and the National Guard fired on the crowd, killed 4 people and wounded 8. You know, a day that is a dark stain on America, and a good example of exactly what I'm talking about. Very easy to do. And I think if you look at the data on just about every protest that I've seen happen in the U.S. and Canada in the last 5-10 years, every single one of those crowds has police agent provocateurs. See an anarchist, you know, check out his boots. He's got government-issued, you know, police department boots. You know, he's an agent provocateur. So it's such an easy ploy to use. And but also, people don't seem to understand that this is a very well understood concept in revolutionary literature and material. It's called pressure from above and pressure from below. And these people who are protesting oftentimes are playing right into the hands of the people they're supposedly protesting. And a lot of times the very people they're after are bankrolling their movement. We saw that with Occupy, and there was revelations about who was bankrolling that, and you know, Lucent Corporation, things like that. So, you know, we have business groups and Rockefellers help bankroll the 60s movements, and you know, it plays right into their hands. And not only that, they get to cash in on creating a vast array of protester swag, you know, protester gear that you can go down to the corporate stores and buy signs and posters and clothes and all kinds of stuff. And then you go out in the street and sell that stuff too. So anyway, they cash in on rebellion, because we live in an age when everything's commodified, including rebellion, which cracks me up when all these teenagers that, you know, get into, you know, death metal and hard rock, real serious heavy metal. You know, they're all fuck the man, and I'm a rebel, and, you know, I don't fit in, and all this other stuff. And they're doing everything to fit in. They're buying the corporate product because that rebellion has been commodified like everything else. So anyway, the power elites, they thrive on an atmosphere of chaos and crime and anarchy, and that's what we have in the United States, and that's what we have in Europe, and that's what we have all over the world, and that's going to further their agenda. And in a lot of ways, the more people go out and protest in the streets, the more it's going to further their agenda, because it will legitimize whatever response they want to have. People sit in their living rooms and watch TV and look at these dirty crowds, or however the media wants to present them, unruly mobs and breaking up stuff and smashing windows and all that other stuff. And then all of a sudden, public opinion turns on them, in spite of the fact that people are out in the streets protesting for the very values that all those people sitting in their living rooms at home actually embrace. So a certain irony there, but that's how the elites pit Americans against each other. That's how they create race wars, class wars, gender wars, all this other stuff. It's so easy for them. So, and everybody falls for it. So that's how easy it works. And you know, the media gets in on it, and they can just present whatever image they want and manipulate it on TV. So everybody's getting exactly the view that they want you to. Another thing that was said in a lot of literary, radical literature is that the real action is in the reaction. So this taps into a lot of ideas that are important to me, including Hegel's dialectic, but the real action is the reaction, and that's it. The protests are an action, but when they respond, that reaction, that's where the real story is, and we're going to see it. Mark my words, we're going to see an event in this country, and probably not too long, where an agent provocateur is going to fire off a round, and there's going to be retribution, and it's going to be legitimized for the full state reaction. So anyway, and this is the same tactic too that our government understands this fully, as do the corporations, and these are the same tactics that they use to build up an infrastructure of protesters in Libya and Egypt and all the Arab Spring. And those were cultivated through social media and CIA planning, and these people were useful idiots too. You know, we used them to topple a despotic dictator to put in a despotic puppet, and so we have this dictator despot trade-in program, and these useful idiots, these poor people who think they're fighting for freedom and liberty and to topple a despot, just end up back in the same position. Egypt is a prime example. They get rid of Mubarak, and they have his military apparatus now running things. The same military apparatus that Mubarak used is now oppressing Egypt. So this idea of useful idiots it's nothing new. Apparently the term was supposedly coined by Lenin to talk about, you know, the co-opting of protest movements in Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution. So he knew what he was talking about, and we've seen plenty of examples of it there. And this idea of the useful idiot is not just corporations, the government, the police, Homeland Security, intelligence operations. It's not just them using citizens and protesters as useful idiots, because there's a hierarchy of useful idiots. And so you have the protesters who are useful idiots, and then you have other citizens who oppress the other citizens, the protesters, and those citizens are the police. So they're useful idiots too, who oppress the other useful idiots. And then the people who ward over the police, they are useful idiots too, for their corporate masters and their government masters. And then the hierarchy of useful idiots just keeps going up, you know, above those government and corporate masters and useful idiots. And of course, that's part of the key. See, each level of useful idiots thinks they're the master because they have control over this level of useful idiot. But that hierarchy of useful idiots goes all the way up, and pretty much all the way up to the top. Someone is somebody else's useful idiot. So anyway, there's my little discussion of useful idiots, a topic obviously it's very dear to my heart. There's my discussion of tactics and pitfalls and protests. So everybody has to find their vehicle, and you know, this is the world of realpolitik we live in, where the tactic of fear can accomplish almost anything. So I guess my advice to anybody that's watching me is just bear in mind these pitfalls of going out in the street and protesting. I'm not saying don't do it or do it. The choice is yours, but bear in mind that it's not necessarily going to be a noble gesture to go out there. It's not necessarily going to be a bunch of fun, and it may or may not accomplish anything. So I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one.